What's up, y'all? It's your boy JTMM, aka Just 10 More Minutes, aka the Freakin 10. We're back with Sabaton history, and this soldier of the three armies. Now, this one fascinated me in the sense of when I saw a soldier of three armies, I started thinking, okay, were we talking about, three different wars? Were we talking about three different sides? And I've since come to learn, through y'all's amazing comments in the commentary exactly what had happened. And so now I'm interested to see, more of that story and how, first as they accepted him and then as he rose through the ranks, as the song mentions. So to me, this is a very fascinating story. So this is part one. I'll do all three. Not sure release schedule wise. I'm going to try and record at least two of them for tomorrow. It's actually still Monday night. So because tomorrow my daughter still has the flu, so I will be with her tomorrow. So I don't know how much recording I'll get done in the morning. So I'm trying to get as much done tonight as I can. So with that being said, let's switch it up. Let's take a listen.
I'm Indy Nidell.
And this is Joachim from Sabaton.
And this is Sabaton History.
Doing a special since we are on Corona lockdown. So unfortunately, we're on Skype right now, but hope you'll understand.
Today's episode is the first part of a trilogy.
And why are we doing 3 episodes? Because it's about soldier of 3 armies.
Love that intro.
Okay, as you can see, or probably see, I am not in Bavaria in the Time Go Studios filming this. I am in Stockholm in my apartment doing this, and my friend Ryan is helping me out doing lighting with whatever lights we have and with his camera and a teleprompter that I found through an app. So Ryan, say hi.
Hello.
That's Ryan. And this is Soldier of Three Armies Part 1. Right. Lauri Alantoni was born May 28, 1919 in Viipuri, Finland on the Karelian Isthmus. He had quite a calm childhood, but the older Lauri grew, the more he became aware of the troubled recent history of Viipuri and his country. In 1917, the Russian revolutions during the Great War had torn the Tsarist Russian Empire, which Finland had been a part of, apart. As civil war then exploded in Russia, Finland took the opportunity to declare its own independence. A bloody Finnish civil war followed as well, but unlike in Russia, where Lenin's Bolsheviks would eventually take control, in Finland they were defeated. Viipuri, well, all of Karelia, still bore the scars of the war, and a border of watchtowers and barbed wire separated Finland from the Soviet Union. Beyond the border lay Soviet Karelia, part of the new worker state. Throughout the 1920s and 1930s, the gulf between the two Karelias only grew. Lauri's father had served in the paramilitary Suojaleskunta, the right-wing civil guards, and he had a deep-rooted hatred for communism, which young Lauri shared. Lauri had a strong constitution, and he was a natural athlete, spending his days swimming, cross-country skiing, and boxing, but it was the tales of great warriors and soldiers that fascinated young Lauri more than anything else. He wanted nothing more than to be a soldier, and spent his time following Viipuri's garrison around, collecting casings and cartridges, to the point that his father even described him as war crazy. As soon as he was old enough, he volunteered for the youth organization of the paramilitary Civil Guard. They taught him things like camping, marching, and marksmanship. At 17, he left the Civil Guards, on the wishes of his parents, to go to business school. But it was pretty clear from the outset that school did not interest the stubborn young man in the slightest. Lauri saw his destiny as becoming a soldier.
I'll back it up a little bit. So many times when you have a parent that was in the military, some people feel like they have to do that, for an acceptance thing, and their heart may not be in it. I've seen that multiple times. Or it's a quick fix, for attitude problems or whatever it may be. But to see someone that was disciplined already, liked the junior paramilitary and liked it, and as much as his parents didn't want him to do it, he still in his heart knew that that was his destiny. Always follow your dreams.
Young man in the slightest. Lowry saw his destiny as becoming a soldier. And in September 1938, at the age of 19, he volunteered for the Finnish Army and was assigned to the 4th Jager Infantry Battalion, which was stationed close to his hometown. The Jager were light mobile infantry, excelling in skirmishing and ambush, moving quickly on bicycles and skis throughout the countryside. Lowry soon proved himself to be an exceptional soldier. He was highly motivated and quick thinking. He was also a typical Finn in that he did not engage in useless talk and was all business on duty. He did, however, have a fiery temper, and it got him into frequent fights. But after just a few months, he had impressed his superiors enough to be sent on an NCO training course. Lowry Tarney graduated first in his class. While he was training, the political situation in Europe, well, the world, was deteriorating rapidly. Nazi Germany had assembled a huge modern army, and after the Sudetenland crisis and the occupation of Czechia, it was obvious they were not shy about using it. That, and the reports of political terror in the Soviet Union, were, of course, a big concern for the Finns. The invasion of Poland in September 1939 by first Germany and then the USSR as well confirmed Finland's fears. Just after that, Joseph Stalin demanded bases and concessions from Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, who began to fall under Soviet control, and little Finland saw itself boxed in between the two giants, and it seemed only a matter of time until hostile eyes would fall on them. And soon they did. As the autumn of 1939 rolled on, the Soviet Foreign Office made repeated demands to the Finns, urging them to give up territory in Karelia and on the Baltic coast, the Rybaki Peninsula with the nickel mines in Petsamo, and to allow Soviet troops to cross Finnish territory. Now, before anyone writes in about Stalin's actual or theoretical motivations for these demands, I cover the Winter War in its entirety, week by week in real time over on my World War II channel, including all of the weeks leading up to it and all of the political machinations. So I'm not going to discuss it here because I already do it in far more depth over there. Well, the Finnish government...
You have to love Indy, right? Because Indy's like, I'm not going to put up with the bullshit here. Go over there. I'll deal with you there.
I already do it in far more depth over there. Well, the Finnish government staunchly refused, as this pact of friendship would involve giving up their entire line of defense against any Soviet attack. And it would also threaten the integrity of Finland as a whole. Again, go discuss this at the other channel. So all the politicians spoke of peace, while the Finnish Defensive Council around Field Marshal Carl Gustav Mannerheim was well aware that refusing Stalin was poking the bear. It was a race against time to prepare Finland against a possible Soviet attack. Mannerheim ordered Finland's main defensive line on the isthmus from the coast to Lake Ladoga to be reinforced as strongly as possible. Soon, tens of thousands of Finns were manning and building up the fortifications, soon called the Mannerheim Line by a French journalist. The name stuck.
So that's where my question was going to be when it says all the wars he came across, cross of Mannerheim, I'm assuming would be Carl Gustav Mannerheim, and received the medal. I would assume that's a medal, much like the Iron Cross and some of the others they've mentioned.
Lauri Tarni was part of a 21,000-man strong covering force spread out between the Mannerheim line and the border. They were to harass and delay the enemy as long as possible, scorching the earth of anything useful. The Finns had a well-trained and well-motivated army, but only a few things like anti-tank guns and artillery pieces. The only two tanks actually in their service were 32 obsolete Renault FT tanks from 1919 and a few unarmed Vickers Armstrong 6-tonners, nothing that would come even close to what the Soviets could throw at them. Well aware of the disparity of force, and of course the amount of manpower each side could raise, Soviet Red Army Command didn't concern itself with Finnish preparations and planned to simply steamroll across the isthmus in one huge offensive and into the Finnish heartland. War came November 30th.
I covered it in the song itself. Oh, I still have my sticker my daughter gave me. I covered it in the song reaction, but that little delivery right there, where they just kind of throw the beat off, and you think it's gonna go do 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 do, and then they go do 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 do. Loved that. I love the song. The song is great. It's one of those again that's different than what they've done.
After a forced incident on the border, the Soviet Union attacked Finland. All along the isthmus, the Soviet artillery opened up. Tarny's unit was at breakfast as heavy shells began falling all around the camp. The men of Tarny's unit were suddenly facing the advancing 120,000 men and 1,400 tanks of the Soviet 7th Army. And this was just a part of the Soviet attacking force. Tarny and his unit made a fighting retreat. The Finns mined the streets and sniped at the enemy as they fell back. They really had the terrain advantage on their side. Along the entire border with the USSR lies some of the densest forest on Earth. And the only part of it where an enemy could attack in large force with things like tanks was pretty much on the Isthmus of Karelia. But even the Karelian terrain, with its own forests and marshes, offered only a few good roads for the Soviet armored columns, and that basically funneled them into killing zones. The weather was now getting worse by the day as well. It was one of those harshest winters in history that you hear about in pretty much every war that ever happened in winter, but the winter of 1939-1940, it really was one of them. Temperatures soon dropped dozens of degrees below zero, and snowdrifts could be as high as 2 or 3 meters in the forests, where the Soviets, for the most part, had no skis, and where the Finns were at home.
I'll back it up a little bit, because it's one of those, because he's 100% right. When being from Texas, and a lot of my subscribers are in Europe, so one of the ways that we will trap fish, if we don't have poles, is you'll set a trap. Now, it's not just for fish, it's for any game, and that is truly a funnel, right? Where you truly funnel them in to where they don't realize how to get back out. And that's exactly what I was sitting here picturing, is if you've got this dense forest and literally you're going to lead them down this road, I mean, the mines you could lay to take out the tanks, to take out large groups, to make them completely disoriented. That's a huge advantage. Don't be underestimated in that. Ooh.
Where the Soviets, for the most part, had no skis, and where the Finns were at home. In such conditions, the Red Army's overwhelming numbers meant little, and Tarny's Jäger were able to delay their advance for a whole week before joining the main line. Defensive fighting continued all December long as the Finns tried to hold back the waves of Soviet troops. Finnish casualties were surprisingly low, as their enemy was constantly prevented from concentrating force. But as the new year began, tens of thousands of Soviet troops were starving and freezing to death in snow and ice-covered trenches. Once halted, a Soviet column was forced to try to dig into the frozen ground, waiting for supplies and reinforcements to come in. In many parts of Finland, supplies could not come in though, and I am not exaggerating about Soviet soldiers starving to death. In their white snowsuits, the Finns were like ghosts, moving unseen through the snow-covered ridges and forests. Tarny lived for the excitement of sneaking up close to a Soviet position and attacking with hand grenades and Molotov cocktails. Bit by bit, such quick hit-and-run attacks with submachine guns and satchel charges whittled down and destroyed the Soviet positions. Tarny soon made a name for himself as a daredevil who did not shy away from danger. He embraced it. He loved the adrenaline rush and the chaos of combat. Instead of being stressed or shaken, Tarny remained totally calm and focused. He soon commanded his own squad as he rose to Alekersantti, under-sergeant, and led his men like wolves on the prowl, overrunning enemy trenches and dragging prisoners back to their own lines. Over the course of the winter, The Soviets suffered dearly for every inch of Finnish territory they took, but their casualties and their ammunition could be replaced. The Finns had only a small pool of manpower and resources, and no allies other than international volunteers on which to call. A peace treaty between Finland and the Soviet Union was signed March 12, 1940. Soviet Foreign Minister Vyacheslav Molotov, the guy Molotov cocktails are named after, read out the peace terms. The Soviets will move the Finnish border and take the whole Karelian Isthmus, including Viipuri. This region was home to 12% of the Finnish population. The Soviets will lease Hanko Peninsula, take the Ribaki Peninsula, a bunch of islands off the coast, and some land near Salla. This is all roughly 25,000 square miles of land, but perhaps more importantly, every naturally occurring defensive line Finland has. Finns in the ceded land had 2 weeks in which to evacuate. They could choose to remain in their homes and become part of the Soviet Union, but not a single one did. True story. Well over 400,000 Finns were rendered homeless, and Tony's family was among the long trail of refugees that made their way across the new border. Tony, however, had not fought his last battles. He was sent to officer school, graduating as second lieutenant. The world, however, was descending further and further into war.
I'm going to back it up because I'm curious. One of the first things that caught me was, when they were talking about the nickel mines and the different mines in that region that Stalin was wanting. Were those part of, because I don't know that geography very well, but my question would be, are those part of what they ended up giving up? Because obviously the Soviets wanted more, is my assumption, and maybe I should go check out Indy's channel. But I'm curious if that was part of what they gave up in this treaty, or some of those natural resources with those mines and things like that. Just curious.
The world, however, was descending further and further into war. Tarny had not seen the end of it by a long shot. Remember, he was a soldier of 3 armies, and the Finnish army was just one of them.
Now, another thing different about today is you have brought something with you. You have a book with you.
Yes, I did bring a book.
Born a Soldier, The Times and Life of Larry Thorne, J. Michael Cleverly. Now, they might not know who Larry Thorne is because it's not mentioned in the first episode, but it is an alias that Lauri Tarni uses, foreshadowing. Later on in his life and career, he becomes Larry Thorne.
Yes.
So why do you have this book with you?
Oh, it's kind of special in a way. 2 things. One, it inspired the lyrics, or me writing the song in a way.
Yeah.
And especially also, it's a cool thing that, we always kept asking our fans to send us emails or books for that matter. And if you do give us books, please make sure they're in sort of English, Swedish, Danish, or Norwegian that we could understand. But this one was actually given to me by a guy called Petri. And he's been around for a while. I think I met him, I guess it's almost 10 years ago now.
Yeah.
Finnish guy. We met in a sauna on a boat between Sweden and
course you did. Okay. Oh, was it on one of the rock boats, or like a music boat?
Yes, I think so, actually. And no, it's really, over the years, he kept, nagging me. You should make a song about Lauri Alanto. I'm like, yeah, whatever. And of course, we've been, in the sauna drinking or whatever.
Yeah.
And I forget because I'm senile, okay? So after a few years, he gave me this book.
Yeah.
And that's a song.
Well, a couple of things hit me about that. No, 3 things. 3
Love
points.
little
Okay,
stories
one,
like that.
You said if they give you books, they should be in English or Swedish or a language that you understand. Let's say, for example, that there was like a book about smoking snakes that somebody really wanted you to read, but it was only in Portuguese. Couldn't some Brazilian guy just stand next to you for a few days and just, just read it out loud, translating, going,
Look on his face.
Come on, that'd be okay, right? Yeah. Or since you obviously encourage people to send you books and things for ideas for other songs, why don't, because you're on lockdown, why don't we just print like your home address on the screen, right? And then people can send things by DHL or Federal Express, and then you'll have lots of great books to read while you're in
put my home address on the internet. That's
of course.
Brilliant.
I mean, what could possibly nothing. I mean, worst case scenario, you get some books. Absolute worst case scenario. Nothing else could possibly happen. No, I did have another point I wanted to make. Something else. You mentioned you met him on one of those music boats, and I think what maybe a lot of people around the world don't know is that for the quarter of a century that I've lived in Sweden, and I'm sure back before, there's always been rock boats on the Baltic. There's always boats several times a year. It used to be once a week on Wednesdays. I saw Fireside, the first show I saw on a boat, in like the little teen disco on a Wednesday night Viking line. But the rock the boat things are great.
So many good bands I've seen on those. I mean, I saw old Black Sabbath singer Tony Martin perform there, and lots of good stuff.
Yeah, no, that's an awesome thing about the North. I hope that other areas of the world have like rock ferries and things like that, but I fear that they don't.
Well, there's 70,000 tons of metal. They're starting in America now with these cruises from Florida going out. But I mean, I think the first one was in 2011, so they're pretty late to the party.
Okay, well, speaking of parties, I think episode 1 about Lauri Tarni, the soldier of 3 armies, is just about done for today, because we have a bunch of other stuff we want to talk about him, and they can get to that in parts 2 and part 3. So I will say goodbye for this week.
Goodbye for this week.
From Sabaton History.
All right, everyone, you know the drill. You click,
I love this part.
click, get some subscriptions, check out Indy's other channels, become a Patreon. That's it. Get the fuck out of here.
I'll never get tired of that. I just won't. You know, it's a fascinating story for part 1, because I go back to what was the motivation, and obviously Indy said go check it out there, and he goes into it more depth on his channel. But to want to go across that northern peninsula, unless you're wanting the nickel mines, I mean, the only thing you're doing is then, as Indy said, is boxing them in from the south and then the north, and eventually probably from the Swedish side as well. So, you know, to be able to hold off that many with that few just speaks to, and again, people underestimate the terrain, right? And being able to utilize that to your advantage, and imagine if you've got that survival skill and you're used to that terrain, and you know how to hide in the snow, you know how to survive in the snow, you will have a huge advantage. I mean, just absolutely huge. And that's why, honestly, when they talk about the Green Beret stuff, a lot of those guys are training in some of the worst conditions known to man to be able to do stuff like that. And it's absolutely insane. And my hat goes off to them for being able to do that. And that really goes for, we can talk about political idolizations, but for these soldiers that believe what in defending their country, quite honestly, I don't have a huge problem with it. There's some that are forced, obviously, in certain countries under dictatorship. But for those that aren't, that believe in what their country stands for and are willing to die for that, political aspirations of their leaders aside, hats goes off to the soldiers, because they go through some of the most rigorous and just asinine training that I've ever heard of. And I've seen stuff like the Green Beret training and stuff, not obviously firsthand, but some of the documentaries out there, and yeah, it's absolutely insane. Interesting episode. Okay, so we are done with episode 1. I'm going to start recording episode 2, so at least I can get those 2 out there. So I won't do all of the fancy little things flashing up, but I just will say like, subscribe, share. If you want to support me with all this time and effort, you can go out to buymeacoffee.com/JTMMTV, which is just 10 more minutes TV. And you can support me there. But really all I ask for is like, subscribe, share. So with that being said, I'm going to jump into part 2. I'll see you later.